When I was a boy, the spirit world terrified and tortured me, taking my rest and innocence in one fell swoop at the age of 5 in Wales. I survived but was forever changed. Now, years later, after nearly losing my sight, I've decided to leave the shadows. People around the world now know these things they previously could dismiss are real and have, with a complete lack of common sense, decided to brave the dangers of the spiritual realm, a stunt akin to dancing in traffic with a blindfold on. Reassembling an old team with my gifted childhood friend, we seek to train a new generation of folks to assist us in reaching around the globe to the fires that have been started by the careless, the foolish, and the utterly incompetent. Please welcome Joel, healer and gifted shaman. Today's episode: The Enfield Haunting. In 1977, my family and I went to stay in England several months, from the beginning of June until nearly the end of August. It was the end of a 3 years long drought that deluged the kingdom with all the pent-up water and storming that had not come their way with interest. The water dredged up bodies from cemeteries and bogs alike, releasing energy and spiritual power into the surroundings at levels that jump-started or awakened things best left to antiquity. Horror after horror, apparition after apparition came after me in the night and in the day, in cemeteries and forgotten rooms beneath homes where we stayed. I was locked into closets, restrooms, and terrified from sleep by things passing through this plane at right angles to our existence. A hard thing for a child of 5 to deal with, gifted or not. But worse than what I experienced, worse than what I saw or dealt with, was yet to come. But not for me, no. My family flew out of Heathrow Airport and never looked back on August 29th of 1977 to return home, unknowingly towing an ancient and esurient evil that hungered to snuff out my light.
For Janet Hodgson, age 11, August 30th, 1977, would mark the beginning of her tribulations and suffering. A council house miles to the north of downtown London in Enfield at 284 Green Street in Brimsdown would become the center of an explosion of spiritual activity that hit every high note, struck every fearful possibility of what can occur at the center of a spiritual attack. The previous rule book was seemingly rewritten in one slashing sweep of a pen. Events that were thought to be unable to cross over into each other's domains became commonplace and daily occurrences before the eyes of the family, the police, investigators, psychic, and paranormal specialists. Rather than take the middle road and lay out both sides of this incredible story, this time we will focus on the facts of the case as opposed to what naysayers and skeptics chose to disbelieve despite the eyewitness accounts of those who were present. Their desire to do more or see more or demand more while the events unravel are the tools of hindsight, perverse in their demands for attention.
The fateful night was a balmy one, not the slightest out of the ordinary. Peggy Hodgson, the children's mother, was busy cleaning and tidying up the house they had just moved into. The children were upstairs getting ready for bed, and the usual play fighting between Janet and her older sister Margaret, who was 13 at the time, was in full swing. As the duo tussled, a strange sound broke them from their sport and caused them to both warily look around the room for the source. Suddenly, the still pair saw what had caused it. A chest on the floor had moved from its original spot and was now slightly out of place. Breaking from their previous positions, they were shocked to watch the chest suddenly heave to once more and move at them. They jumped back in shock, and it moved again, only this time further than before. But they both realized at once that it was not bearing down on them. It was headed to the door of the bedroom. Luckily, their mother had heard the loud sounds of wood scraping on wood and thought the girls had decided to get more than playful in their carousing and investigate. Peggy came in shouting about the noise and clamor and saw the chest out of place. Blaming the girls who were across the room and frightened for its current disposition, she tried to push it back. Instead of being able to move it to its original location, it shoved back, hard. This time, rather than lunging in fits and stops, the chest plowed past her attempts to stop it and crashed into the door.
Then things began to disappear and reappear in the house as if randomly teleporting in and out of existence. Peggy, frightened and unable to come up with an answer, called her neighbors in for help, Vic and Gary Nottingham. They would witness chairs levitating, objects flying across the room, and knocking inside the walls. Their response was to harbor the family to their home and call the police. Now, the craziest thing about this investigation is how many people witnessed these events, either up close or from the streets. However, the most important, incredible witness was about to enter the story. WPC Carolyn Heaps came to the home after being assigned to investigate the disturbance and filled out a detailed report. Here's the report.
On Thursday, 1st September 1977 at approximately 1 a.m, I was on duty in my capacity as policewoman when I received a radio message to 284 Wood Street, Enfield. I went to this address where I found a number of people standing in the living room. I was told by the occupier of this house that strange things had been happening during the last few nights, and they believed that the house was haunted. Myself and another PC entered the living room of the house, and the occupier switched off the lights. Almost immediately I heard the sound of knocking on the wall that backs into the next door neighbour's house. There were 4 distinct taps on the wall, and then silence. About 2 minutes later I heard tapping, but this time it was from a different wall. Again it was a distinctive peal of 4 taps. The PC and the neighbours checked the walls, taken pipes, but could find nothing to explain the knockings. The PC and the neighbours all went into the kitchen to check the refrigerator pipes, etc., leaving the family and myself in the living room. The lights in the living room were switched off again, and within a few minutes the eldest son pointed to a chair which was standing next to the sofa. I looked at the chair and noticed that it was wobbling slightly from side to side, and then I saw the chair slide across the floor towards the kitchen wall. It moved approximately 3 to 4 feet and then came to a rest. In no time did it appear to leave the floor. I checked the chair, but could find nothing to explain how it had moved. The lights were switched back on. Nothing else happened that night, although we have later reports of disturbances at this address.
Despite what she saw and her desire to help, WPC Heaps had to leave as, quote, there were no laws being broken, unquote.
Now, to those who would question the credibility of the 30 eyewitness testimonies, keep this in mind. Though the girls tested the researchers from the Society for Psychical Research by faking some of the events of their own to see if they could tell the difference, they caught them each time and admonished them that such tests would call into question the rest of the events if they continued to do it. Admittedly, by Janet in a later interview, she said 2% of what occurred was them trying to see if the experts would know what they were doing or not, as they themselves had begun to lose sight of what was real and not. And unlike the movie, Janet didn't believe the ghost or spirit was a demon or that it was a classic haunting, as it simply wants to interact, exist, talk, be heard, and or seen. Thus her claim the house was not haunted in the classic sense. She was, of course, wrong in that regard. Though the haunting was atypical, it still falls well under the heading of such a thing. And thus we come to the beginning of the main investigation.
September 5th, 1977, Morris Gross, a new member of the Society for Psychical Research, came to visit the family at their home. During this visit, he advised Ms. Hodgson to remain calm and take extensive notes of the events. On the 8th of that month, he would return with 3 Daily Mirror reporters and witness a loud crash that was unexplained and no source could be found within the home. Convinced that the case was real, he agreed to take it on and return in full swing to investigate. Subsequent visits, he and others observed the following. 1. Door chimes that swung on their own. 2. Small objects that jumped on their own, some of which were teaspoons, cardboard boxes, and a fish tank lid. 3. Doors, drawers, and cabinet opening of their own accord in full view. 4. Marbles that flew through the air on their own, then landed on the hardwood floor, but would not roll.
The witnesses to these events were Morris Gross, the Hodgsons, Peggy Nottingham's father, 4 reporters, and a photographer from the Daily Mirror. Please note, the Nottingham family next door had a member with the same name as Janet's mother. Sorry for the possible confusion. Morris Gross, realizing he was going to need assistance, made an appeal to the SPR members, and Guy Playfair responded, joining the investigation on the 12th of September. The duo would come to the house together that day, along with Rosalind Morris of the BBC Radio 4 show The World this weekend. The pair would work together and visit for more than a year for a total of 180 visits and 25 all-night vigils at the Enfield home.
Things would take a hard turn in December of 1977 when a new entanglement began. 3 months into the original disturbances, a voice emanated from Janet. It started as a series of whistles and dog barks, but quickly developed into a human male voice. That of an elderly man that would identify himself as Joe Wilkins. The voice regularly swore like a sailor, cursed at them, and laughed and claimed to be still alive and sleeping in Janet's bed, hence why she was always being thrown bodily from it at night. It was later discovered that a man named Bill Wilkins had died in a house in a chair downstairs. Now, to add to the creepy factor, all the furnishings in the house were the same as when Bill had lived there, right down to the chairs downstairs. A council house, for those in the United States, is akin to a Section 8 home, or one provided for low-income or in-need families. Oftentimes, the furnishings will stay with the house even when the occupants change. This fact is hauntingly similar to the Amityville horror in that all the furnishings the Lutz family inherited from the murder DeFeo family as well.
In an effort to identify the source of the voice, Janet's mouth was taped up, she was ordered to hold water in her mouth, and though slightly muffled, when this was done, the sound still came forth strong and intelligible. Further, when asked where the sound came from to her, Janet said it always sounded as though it was coming from behind her, not in front. And when a microphone was placed in front of her during one of Bill's tirades, it was less audible than when the microphone was placed to her neck. Experts that were brought in posited all kinds of ideas, from ventriloquism to false vocal cord use. However, all of that falls apart in the face of the reality that using them would result in up to 2 months of hoarseness from casual use. Most of the equipment brought in to try and record the events, such as film and early VCR cameras, would fail or be unable to be turned on, relegating the investigation to audio recordings and snap film photography. Guy would later lament in an interview that had he even 1 or 2 of the modern innovations for capturing ghosts on video, he would have been able to show you things to shock you to your core.
However, it started as all things do, even this strange event would pass, though hardly on its own. In fact, many gifted came to assist the family, including
Brazilian mediums Luis Gasparetto and Elsie Dubugra, theatrical medium Jerry Sherrick, Matthew Manning, healer and psychic, Diane Warren, clairvoyant, and lastly, Dono Gmelig Meling, a Dutch healer and clairvoyant that apparently was the one to strike a bargain with the spirits to leave them alone.
this arrangement between Gemelig Melling and the entity in the house would last all the days of Peggy Hodgson's life in that home. When Janet would return, she could feel that she was watched and listened to, but nothing happened ever again.
After Peggy's death, unfortunately, all bets were off. The house was briefly occupied by Claire Bennett, mother of 4. Her report on the home was as follows. I didn't see anything, but I always felt uncomfortable. There was definitely some kind of presence in the house. I always felt like someone was looking at me. According to her sons, they would wake at night hearing people talking downstairs. Then one fateful night, her son, Shaka, woke to see a strange man enter his room. She learned later that it was indeed the Enfield haunting house, and that was that. She moved after only 2 months of occupancy. Families over the past 10 years do not stay long, nor do they wish to be interviewed. Several YouTube channels have tried to gain access or talk to the occupants, and at most have gotten reports from neighbors who tell that the mysterious knocking and sounds still continue, even when the house lies empty, waiting for a new family to enter.
Thanks for listening. If you like what we do here, please smash that like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notified the instant we upload or go live.
If you have questions that need answering, paranormal problems that need solving, or just a friendly ear that can relate to issues you have or may be going through, please feel free to contact us on this channel. All encounters are 100% private and free of charge.
Please share with friends, leave comments if you have criticism or praise. We just love to hear from you.
Remember,
You have no need to fear the darkness.
if you only know where to look to find the light.